Welcome to a new video. Today we are talking about 5 PC building myths that I want to bust today, or rather that I want to show you some alternatives of my point of view, because I have had some different experiences than maybe some of you had. First of all, it's probably going to be the most controversial one, and this is going to be the power supply orientation. While it is common to use or to put the power supply in your case fan side down, I have actually found a lot of benefits putting the fan upwards. And this is not only because when some people put their PC on carpet, and even very plush carpet for example, the airflow from the fan gets starved. Also, cleaning dust filters regularly isn't really that common or gets forgotten very often. I had to replace a lot of power supplies on customer PCs when I worked for retail. So yeah, that's something I always changed when that was the case. And also a power supply turned with the fan side upwards can aid in better temperatures in GPU and CPU, because first of all, a bit hotter operation in the power supply itself does not really reduce the lifespan of the component, because power supplies nowadays are very often rated at 50 or 40 degrees operation, and in a PC case you normally have about 35 to 40 degrees. So in theory, this should be plenty of headroom for the power supply to work fine. The only downside is that you have to stretch the cables, or sometimes don't have enough cable length. If that is the case, or if you don't have holes in the power supply cover or a power supply shroud, then obviously you cannot mount it with the fan side up, but otherwise this would be probably maybe the better option even. But that's also something that you have to decide. I personally am just saying that this would be an option for some added benefits. The second thing is the amount of RAM sticks. While most people buy a PC with 2 RAM sticks, and in theory that should be enough RAM for pretty much everybody, because on DDR5 this is available in the 32 GB sticks, so you could use even 64 GB with only 2 sticks. You have some benefits in using 4 RAM sticks, especially on bandwidth limited applications or CPU limited applications. I have myself tested it 2 versus 4 RAM sticks. It was previously on Ryzen 2 and 3000, and there I was able to see a benefit of up to 10% in CPU performance in games because of the bandwidth limitations of 2 sticks. Of course, yes, there's only going to be dual channel RAM, but the plus side is that you have more ranks inside the RAM because you are using more RAM sticks and therefore have a higher bandwidth. You can also see that by just running memtest with, or a bandwidth test in AIDA64 for example, with 2 and 4 sticks, and you will see that the bandwidth will go up, although obviously not by as much as if you would use quad channel versus dual channel. This also only works if you use RAM sticks which have a single rank. Obviously, if you would use 4 single rank DIMMs and 2 versus 2 dual rank DIMMs, this wouldn't make a difference because the amount of ranks would be the same. But if you, for example, used 4 single rank DIMMs or 2 dual rank DIMMs, then your difference will be there that I just explained. The issues in stability with using 4 RAM sticks is not really there anymore. There have been stability issues in the previous generations of Ryzen, for example, Ryzen 1000, 2000, maybe even 3000. But nowadays, this isn't really a big issue anymore, except when you run really high frequencies, so DDR5 7000 or whatever, and DDR4 4200 and up. But nowadays, this pretty much has been solved, and the compatibility with 4 RAM sticks is way better than it was before. Next thing is the PCI Express SSD speed. We are now at the point where PCI Express 5.0 is pretty much arrived in the mainstream, and also PCI Express 5.0 SSDs have arrived, and they claim to have higher read and write speed than PCI Express 4.0 or 3.0 SSDs. While 3.0 SSDs had around 3.5 gigabytes and 4.0 are about 6 to 7 gigabytes read and write, the performance in applications or in games when loading stuff is pretty much the same. So If the price is the same, obviously you could go for the SSD with the higher PCI Express generation, but the speed in reality, if the drive that has the newer generation PCI Express standard, is not really always the fastest and not really always the thing to go for. So just something to keep in mind, that you don't have to spend the extra dollars to get the standard. Last two things are to do with cooling, because there are some myths about cooling as well. First of all, it is going to be while you are building the PC in the first few steps, and this is thermal paste application. Many people believe that spreading the thermal paste or putting a blob in the middle or putting an X there or putting a line down the CPU is going to make a difference. No, it won't. The only difference you're going to see is if you don't use enough thermal paste. Because even if you use too much, then it's gonna just squeeze out the side of the CPU. It's gonna make a mess, yes, but it's not going to hinder performance, at least by much. It is going to spread by the pressure, by the mounting pressure of the cooler, and is going to be spread even more when the CPU gets hot the first time, because the thermal paste gets less viscous and therefore squeezes out more and has or creates a smaller layer. In spreading the thermal paste, in theory, you could even introduce air bubbles, so this would be, in theory, the worst thing to do, but it's not really that bad. Especially on GPUs, it makes sense, because on GPUs you want to cover the whole die 100%. You could just use more thermal paste and put a blob in the middle, which I like to do and which manufacturers also tend to do, but spreading it could also be an option to make sure that you cover 100% of the die. Last thing is going to be all-in-one water cooling orientation. And there has been a lot of fight about since the all-in-ones first launched with the single 120mm AIOs, where you put them in the back of the case, either with the tubes facing down or the tubes facing upwards. There was not much of a difference doing that. But nowadays, big AIOs are put in the front of the case, and obviously this is not ideal, as you are pulling through or pushing through the air first through a hot all-in-one water cooling unit and then heating up the whole case, basically also increasing GPU temperatures. So this is suboptimal in general, but most of the people, or a lot of people, still do it that way. I don't know why. It's a mystery to me. But the other thing is the orientation of the tubes, because the people say, or some people say, that you can't put the all-in-one at the front, in the front of the case, because you are I don't know, the volume of the water is lower than the head of the pump. While yes, you should never put the top, like the top end tank of the radiator below the pump, because if you do that, the pump is going to be pulling a lot of air and therefore going to be damaged and going to be loud as well, not performing. But as long as you put the end tank of the radiator above the pump, this is going to be fine, because the air is going to be collected in the highest part of the loop, while the AIO, or while the pump may collect some air bubbles while first turning on, because it's just pulling them through the loop. The air is, while it's being cycled, being collected in the top tanks again, and the noise that you first hear in the first 1 to 2 minutes of starting the PC will go away. And therefore this does not matter as much, or isn't really a bad thing. That's basically it for our first 5 PC building myths. If you want to see more of them, let us know in the comments below, or maybe you have some yourself. Would be interesting if you have experienced some weird PC builds in the past, and that you want to tell us about. And otherwise, I wish you a nice day, and goodbye.